All the readings point in their different ways towards the passion and death of Jesus. Jeremiah tells a shattered Jewish people going into exile as a punishment for breaking the old covenant that God will not forsake them. He foresees a time when God will form a new relationship with the people of Israel based on love and personal respect. God will put a new heart and a new spirit into his people. This focuses their attention on the first Holy Thursday evening, the night before Christ died. When raising the cup, Christ introduced the new covenant in his blood to be shed for the forgiveness of sins. The second reading tells us that because Jesus suffered and prayed with tears to be saved from death, he can sympathize with our sufferings and help us grow rather than be crushed by them. Jesus knows our plight, is touched by our anguish and distress, and pleads with God the Father on our behalf. In the Gospel, Christ speaks his thoughts out loud and expresses repugnance for the terrible ordeal before him. His soul is troubled at the prospect of Calvary, and he's tempted to pray for deliverance from it. However, he cannot ask to be spared his agony, as God's kingdom will come only through crucifixion and death. His moment of greatest influence will be when he's lifted up on the cross with arms outstretched to embrace all the world. Christ on the cross shows us the depth of evil of which we humans are capable and the heights of love with which we're called. Every Christian is called to live out the passion of Jesus Christ in their own lives. No one is excused or spared its agony. There's no crown bearers in heaven who were not cross bearers on earth. Following Christ means travelling the same road, laying down our lives and leaving everything completely in the hands of God the Father. To drive home this point, Jesus takes an example from the world of nature. Our lives, like Christ's, must resemble the grain of wheat that goes down into the ground to produce new life. The grain of wheat dying in the earth indicates how we must die to our own selfishness before we can start living the life of Christ. One comes to a greater life only after dying to a lesser one. Never forget that we are God's grain of wheat, part of his eternal harvest. When Jesus calls, he bids us come and die and put to death within ourselves what is opposed to true life. Christ shows that life and death have a place in God's plan for us. To be buried in the earth means avoiding sin, accepting suffering, and living for others. In every place and in every heart, the struggle between evil and good is still with us. The way of the cross begins at our own doorstep, and we're challenged to follow its path. As Passiontide approaches, we should renew our efforts to remove the layers of human sinfulness through which Satan and the power of evil have made inroads in our lives.